Hey y'all, welcome to a new week of What's for Dinner. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing 5 dinner recipes that I have recently made for my family. So first up, I made these beef tips and gravy. This is a tried and true family favorite recipe that is so easy. It is perfect for a weeknight. So you're going to need about 2 pounds of some beef stew meat. You could save a little bit of money by buying a small chuck roast and just cutting it up yourself. That is normally what I would do, but this particular night I needed the shortcut of having it already cut because both kids are in sports right now and we are at practices 4 nights of the week. So I will take all the shortcuts I could get. Also, I am extremely stuffy today. I know that my overs are going to sound awful today, but I really want to get this video out. Just please bear with me. But I just started by heating up a little bit of oil in my skillet. Just trying to brown the meat. I'm not trying to cook it all the way through, so that just took a few minutes. I did pour in 2 cups of water, and you're going to need some soy sauce. I definitely recommend a lower sodium one for this recipe because, as you can see, we are adding in quite a bit. You will need a 1/4 cup of that. I'm also going to grab some Worcestershire sauce, and I'm going to use that same measuring cup to measure out a 1/4 cup of that as well. So as you can imagine, you do not need any salt for this recipe. Those 2 ingredients are really salty, and towards the end of the cook time, we're going to add in another salty ingredient. But I did season it heavily with some garlic powder and onion powder and lots of black pepper. So here I am just making sure all of that's distributed well. I'm going to wait for that to come up to a boil. And once it reaches that point, I'm going to add a lid to this, turn the heat down a bit, and you're going to let that simmer anywhere from 1.5 hours to 2 hours. So here we are towards the end of that cook time, and I'm going to prepare some brown gravy. So here I have a cup of water measured out, and you'll either need to add in a packet, or if you're like me and have the big container, 3 tablespoons equals a packet. So I always like to switch to a whisk to make sure that I get all the lumps out. I did come in and check my meat at the 1.5 hour mark, and the meat was perfectly fall apart tender. So I moved on with this step. I just added in that brown gravy. I did turn up my heat to start bringing it back up to a boil, and as soon as it reaches that point, it will start to thicken instantly, and you'll just cook that for a couple of minutes until it reaches the thickness that you want. So that is it. As you've seen, very low effort, and now you are left with this incredibly tender beef that's in a super flavorful, rich gravy. It is delicious. You can serve it over mashed potatoes or egg noodles. We chose to go with rice on this night. As you see, I spooned plenty of that gravy over it to soak it all up. I did top it with some parsley, and we did a side of peas, and it's just so good. We really enjoy this, and I highly, highly recommend this recipe. Next up, I made another oldie but goodie. This is a Trisha Yearwood recipe that I've made about a handful of times now. I found this recipe several years ago. It's a crock-pot pork loin with a homemade gravy to go over the top. And it's just a meal that we always enjoy. The flavors in it are pretty unique. So let me show you how to make it. So you can either use a pork tenderloin or you can use a pork loin. This was my first time doing this particular recipe with a pork loin. You only need anywhere from 2.5 to 3 pounds of it, and this one was closer to 4.5 pounds. So I did decide to take and cut 4 good sized pork chops from it, and I will just put those in a freezer bag and throw them in the freezer and use that for a different meal at a later time. And I don't know if y'all caught it, but this whole thing was just a little over $13, but I am going to be making 4 meals from it for 4 people. So when you look at it that way, it's actually a really good deal and a good way to save some money. So now that I got the pork chops cut from it, I'm going to go in and I'm going to trim off as much fat as I possibly can. You just don't need it for this recipe. So I'm not going to show myself doing all of it, but I just wanted to give you all a good idea. So like I said, those pork chops are going in the freezer. I'm going to get those out of the way. And now I'm going to start seasoning the meat. So I'm going to do some salt, lots of black pepper. I'm also going to go in with some garlic powder. You will need some ground ginger, and the recipe that I'm going to link in my description box for this calls for a pretty small amount of it, but honestly, I've had that in my spice cabinet for a while. I really wanted to use it up and get it out of the way and buy some fresh, so I just ended up using what was left in there. I also use some dry thyme, and I'm just kind of massaging that in, kind of getting that distributed a little bit better and patting it in. And I'm going to season the other side the exact same way. So here I am just taking the sides of the meat and like the front of it where I cut it and just using or trying to swipe up all the seasoning that was left on that cutting board. So you definitely want to sear this meat before putting it in the crock pot. So I had some vegetable oil in this skillet. I had it at a pretty high heat, and I just left it in there for a few minutes without touching it. And here I've just flipped it over, and I'm going to do the same thing. I also like to take the time to get the sides seared as well. So that just takes about a minute. Just doing that with a fork, as you can see. This really doesn't take long at all. And now you can transfer it on over to your crock pot. So next, I'm going to get a measuring cup, and I'm going to measure out 2 cups of chicken broth. I've had this measuring cup for a really long time. You can't even see the numbers on it, so I just take a couple of minutes to try my best to find it, kind of put my finger there and measure it out that way. You're also going to need about a tablespoon of soy sauce to add to this. And I'm just going to give that a little mixy mix, and this recipe does call for a lemon. That's what I've always used, but I didn't have any, but I did have some limes, and I did not want to go to the grocery store for just one small ingredient. So I decided to try it with a lime. So I just used half of it in there, mix it up, and I'm going to pour that all over that pork. I'm going to add my lid, and I'm going to let this cook on low. So I originally planned to cook this for around 8 hours, but I came in and checked it around the 7-hour mark, and it was completely cooked through. I checked it with my meat thermometer, and it was fall apart tender, so I decided to pull it at around 7 hours. I did do it in a separate bowl because I want it separate from the cooking liquid, and as you can see, it is falling apart so effortlessly. That is exactly what you want. As for this liquid in the crock pot, I'm going to transfer it to a saucepan, all but a half a cup, which is what I have here. I'm going to grab some cornstarch, and I already have it measured out. You are going to need 3 tablespoons of it, and you want to whisk that in really well with that half a cup of the cooking liquid. So here I am, just transfer that on over to the saucepan that had the rest of the cooking liquid in it from the crock pot. You want to make sure to mix it up really good, or you're going to end up with some weird like cornstarch lumps that you don't want. You're just going to let that simmer for a few minutes, and be sure to season it really well with lots of salt and pepper. And that is it. You have a really delicious, really flavorful gravy. So here's the finished product. I served it with some French style green beans and some homemade mashed potatoes, and it was really good. Really enjoyed it as well. But I will say I liked it better in the past, and that's for 2 reasons. I do prefer this recipe with tenderloin versus the loin. I just think it works better for this. And also, I do prefer it with the lemon because I feel like it brightens the flavors, whereas the lime kind of darkened it, if that makes sense. Either way, it was really good, but I recommend it the other way. This night, I tried out a new recipe that I was really excited about. This is one pot teriyaki noodles, and I'm going to serve it with these pot stickers. These are just some frozen chicken and vegetable dumplings. I have never had these before, never bought them, but I had a coupon, so I wanted to try them, and I thought it would pair perfectly with this meal. So here, I have a half a head of cabbage and 2 carrots. I've also got my box grater pulled out, and I'm just going to shred up those vegetables. The cabbage definitely gets pretty messy, but it gets the job done. I like the way it finally shreds it, so I'm just going to get that added to a hot skillet. I kind of cleaned up my workstation, and now I'm shredding the carrots. Those are definitely a lot more manageable. After I got those shredded, I'm just going to dump that straight on top of the cabbage. I do have my skillet on about medium-high heat. There was just a little bit of olive oil at the bottom before I added the vegetables, and here I am just sauteing those. I cooked them for about 5 minutes just to give those a head start on getting tender. Here I created a little well in the center, and the recipe called for ground ginger. Didn't realize that, so like I said, I had to use it all for the pork. But luckily I had some of that squeezed ginger, so I just added a little bit of that in and sauteed it in with the vegetables. I promise I'm not affiliated with the soy sauce. I just happened to use it a lot in this week's video. But you need a 2/3 cup of soy sauce, a half a cup of brown sugar, and just a small amount of ground mustard. I added in some garlic powder, and I'm just going to give that a good stir. I'm going to go ahead and grab a 1-pound box of spaghetti noodles, and I'm going to add all of that into this pot. I am breaking the noodles in half, but you don't have to. And you're going to add in 4 cups of water. The original recipe called for 3.5, but I did go ahead and just go with 4 cups. It's definitely not going to feel like it's enough. I was worried about it, but you just got to trust the process. It does work out in the end. So you're going to let that boil anywhere from 18 to 20 minutes. That's how long mine took. But you definitely definitely want to come in every few minutes and give it a good stir so that the noodles don't like clump together and so that nothing like sticks to the bottom. But that is it. That's all you have to do for the noodles. They are ready to be served. I top the noodles with the cooked dumplings, and I just put some of the dumpling sauce over all of it. I sprinkled it with some sesame seeds and some freeze-dried chives, or you could do green onions, but I really love the way that this looked. Thought it was pretty and just something different. And y'all, I ended up really loving this meal, but unfortunately I was the only one in the house that liked it. Josh really did try, but he did not like the noodles. He thought the pot stickers were okay. Riley and Boston would not try the little pot stickers. Riley did try the noodles. She did not like them either, and Boston just wouldn't even try it. So I really wish that I cut this recipe in half, but oh well. On this night, I wanted to use up the leftover pork from the crock-pot pork recipe, so I turned it into this pulled pork chili. I made this a while back for Josh's lunchbox, and we really loved it, so we wanted to have it again. This is just a little recipe I made up, and we think it's delicious. So I start by sauteing a little bit of minced garlic and some olive oil. Then I dump in the leftover pork. Here, I'm just taking my spatula and breaking up the bigger chunks. Last time I used beef broth, I'm pretty sure, but I had the leftover chicken broth in my fridge, again, from that crock pot recipe, so I finished that off. It was about 2 cups. I'm adding in 1 can of diced tomatoes, followed by 2 8-ounce cans of tomato sauce. Last time I used baked beans, and that was really good, but I saw this chili magic by Bush's. I've never seen that before, so I wanted to try it. That was also really good. I'm pretty sure it's just their version of chili beans, though. So here I am just giving those ingredients a little stir, trying to see where I'm at with like the liquid and everything. But now I'm going to start seasoning it up. So I'm going to add in quite a bit of onion and garlic powder. I also want to add in a good amount of chili powder because I really want that flavor to come through, obviously. I'm also going to do a little bit of cumin, and I really like this Grindstaff 3 Kings rub in this. It's like a good all-purpose kind of barbecue seasoning. It's got salt in it, so I didn't add any additional salt. I'm also going to add in a lot of black pepper, and that's it seasoning wise. I also like to add in some hot sauce for this, so I'm using the Slap Your Mama hot sauce. It's a really good one. Found it at a little store in Tennessee. I'm also going to add in several dashes of Worcestershire sauce and some brown sugar. I love to add brown sugar to my chili. I feel like it just ties everything together. So that's all for the ingredients. I'm going to let that boil. Put a lid on it and let it simmer from anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour. I'm pretty sure I did an hour this day, and it's ready. So I'm just serving it up. I like to top it with some shredded cheese and some sour cream. I also like to add some saltine crackers in it. And I also made some homemade cornbread muffins on this day. This was my first time trying out that recipe, so I didn't film it, but this turned out so good, just like it did the last time I made it. And I ended up freezing the leftovers of this chili, so I can pull that out on a day that maybe I don't have time to cook. I also was able to freeze some of the cornbread muffins, so we will have a complete meal on a day that we really need it. So yeah, really good recipe, and I wanted to show y'all the inside of these cornbread muffins to show that they're not dry. It was a really good recipe. I'm going to link it in my description box, and the next time I make it, I will definitely film it. Last but certainly not least, I'm making some broccoli cheddar soup. This is my go-to broccoli cheese soup recipe that I've been making for several years. I have made this so many times, and I just never look for any other broccoli soup recipes because this one is just perfect. It never gets old. So I'm going to start by melting down a half a stick of butter. To that, I'm going to add in a 1/4 cup of just some plain all-purpose flour. This is just the roux. This is what's going to thicken everything later on. So definitely cook out your flour for a couple of minutes. You're going to need 2 cups of chicken broth and 2 cups and half and half. I just put both of those in a measuring cup, and I slowly add that in there, give it a good mix. And I'm also going to add in some onion powder. I usually do that later on in the soup recipe, but I decided to do it here. And as soon as that starts kind of bubbling and steaming, I'm going to add my lid, kind of turn it down, and I'm going to let that simmer for about 20 minutes. And that's going to allow it to really thicken and get nice and creamy. And now you have a really wonderful like soup base to start adding your vegetables into. So I washed and prepped my vegetables earlier in the day to make dinner time go faster. So in here I of course have my chopped broccoli, also shredded up some carrots. So this is about a cup of shredded carrots, and I like to double the amount of broccoli than what the recipe calls for because I don't feel like it calls for enough. So Anyways, I'm going to add my lid back on, and I'm going to let this simmer in that sauce for about 25 more minutes, and that's going to allow it to get really nice and tender. So nutmeg. I feel like this is the key ingredient to this soup. It might not make sense if you've never done it before, but I promise you it works so well in this. It just makes it the best soup ever. Here, I'm just seasoning it with salt and pepper, and that is all the seasonings that you need for this. I did shred up some sharp cheddar cheese, a block of it, so that's 2 cups. I added most of it in here, but I left a little bit to top the bowls with. Y'all, this soup is seriously so delicious. I could literally have it every single week, and it would never get old. I paired it with some sandwiches. This is just some ciabatta bread that I had in my freezer that I thawed out. I buttered and grilled it and layered on some like deli rotisserie chicken meat, white American cheese, mayo, and mustard, and it paired perfectly with this. This was just the best meal ever. But that is all I got for y'all in today's video. I really hope that this helped inspired you or at least motivated you to get in the kitchen. I hope there was at least one recipe in here that maybe you'd like to try. Whatever the reason that you are here for today, I really do appreciate y'all spending these 15 minutes with me today. If you made it this far in the video, thank you so much for watching. I really am so thankful for you guys. I hope everyone has an amazing weekend, and I will see y'all in my next video. Bye, guys.